We're going to talk about self-care today. I am excited to talk about this again with you because I do think that this is a game changer as far as shifting you really into that growth mindset and really coming into yourself. Honestly, I've had this experience where I meet women in midlife who really don't know themselves. They know their roles. They know, who they've been for as long as they've been. I've been mom, I've been manager, I've been, all these things, church volunteer. And yet they don't have a sense when they start to realize that those things are eroding during a life transition like midlife. They don't have a sense of what they want, like just what they want, who they are. And I think that this subject on self-care really helps you to nail that down a bit. I think we get real bombarded real early in our lives as women that taking time for ourselves means taking time away from the people that we care for, and that our primary role in this world is to care for the other people. And we do this even to little girls. Like, this is a gender biased thing that we keep teaching that particular gender. And it isn't changing anytime soon that I can tell. So I am going to start with this radical notion that in order to be the caretaker, if that's the role that you've taken on, we've gone through the programming and conditioning masterclass. If you've kind of started to look at, yeah, I'm mom and yeah, I'm, caretaker here and there, I'm okay with that. Like, I like that about myself. I want to be that dutiful daughter that helps, her parents when they get older. Then great, that's for you. And if you want to do that job well, or any job, any caretaking, anything, if you want to do it well, self-care is essential. So the radical notion that the very first thing that you should start with always is self-care. That when you are feeling a little under the weather, emotionally, physically, that the first thing that you should do is self-care. This idea that the way in which we help the other people in our life, that we caretake, that we do the job, that we serve our communities, is actually by taking care of the vessel that does that work. So this is a really radical idea because from the ground up, you would be switching up how you look at life. Like your to-do list, for instance, would have the non-negotiables be the self-care items and not the grocery list, the dishes in the sink, the the kid to this game, the, whatever is on your boss's agenda for what you need to do at work. Those ones fall off if you don't have the time or the energy or whatever, but the self-care ones don't. And as soon as I say that, it makes women uncomfortable. It makes me uncomfortable if I'm being real with you. I mean, I've been working this stuff personally. I've said that all through this week. I practice what I preach. I'm not great at it all the time. And this one makes me uncomfortable. Like, I'm a single parent. So when somebody doesn't do something in my household, like there's no other adults around to do those things. It's me. So it's a difficult thing for me to put myself first. And it's been a bit tricky of how to work around that. One thing that I do tell people at the start of the online courses, no rules, people. No rules. It's like we are perpetually in COVID. And this is what I mean by that. So during COVID, everything topsy-turvy, right? Like we were just making shit up as we went along. Like, for real, we were just making it up as we went along. We were working from home. We were working and our kids were doing school next to us. Does that even work? It didn't for me. I could tell you that because mine was just right here and you can't do therapy sessions with a little person there. But also I think that one of the things that has been so endearing across COVID is watching people kind of create new fun little things that they did. So like if they couldn't do birthdays with people. Then they created these ways to do it, like I'll do this via Zoom, or people will come by and honk, or da 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 da. Like no rules, right? People had weddings with people watching them online and very few people with masks in the background. No rules. No rules at all. All to say, self-care doesn't have to look any certain way. There are no rules. This is not what self-care is about. Self-care is about what's happening up here and not what's happening out here. It is about putting yourself first, and it is about really shifting into that self-awareness, compassionate self-awareness. Where am I at? Where's my body, emotional energy level, spiritual energy level? What do I need right now? And making sure that this gets replenished always and always first. The analogy that every therapist I've ever known ever uses is when you're on a plane and they tell you about the masks and they say that the adults should put them on first and then they should assist other people. This is the premise of why self-care is so just pivotal for you, especially during any kind of transition, any kind of challenges in your life. And tell me now that that's what you're prioritizing when there's been a death in the family, when you've lost a job, when, you know, some sort of crisis happens with your kids, that self-care is first on your list, right? Totally. Yeah, all of us, right? I know it's not. And so this is the month where we really kind of slog through how to help you understand that as the vessel that does the work in your life, you have to put yourself first. And in putting yourself first, you're putting all of them first. And that's how the math works. You take care of one, and actually you're taking care of, I don't know how many people are in your life, infinity. But if you don't take care of this one, then literally no one gets it. Weird, I know, but that is the reality. And I can tell you, I have sat across the couch thousands of hours from people who want to fight me on this. And I let them. And we just kind of go round and round until it becomes glaringly obvious. Oh, if I don't take care of myself, I really can't do all these things. Okay, so this is why this is a pretty radical notion. I do talk about self-care through the entire 5 months and the group coaching program and in the online coaching program. But what I am really pushing on here is breaking the mold of what self-care is. We're not talking about chocolates. We're not talking about, going and getting your nails done. We're not talking about having a shopping day. Those could be things you use in your self-care regimen, but we are talking about making self-care as important as, dental hygiene. You get up and brush your teeth every single day, right? As important as getting gas in your car, because it's not going to go very far if you're commuting anywhere and you don't have gas. Like, it has to be step one in whatever you're doing in your life. All right, so I've probably harped on that a little bit enough, right? Okay, if you have heard this before, or if this is the first time you're hearing this and you're like, I get you, like I know what you're saying here, but honestly in my life, yeah, that's not gonna work out. Yes, it will, and it will be a game changer for you, I promise you. And this is where I think one of the reasons, not all the reasons, but one of the reasons why group coaching will be so valuable. Think about it. You're going to be challenging yourself to start making self-care such a priority that something like what your boss has, assigned to you might fall off your to-do list, but your self-care won't, right? Or you're going to have to ask somebody else to pick up that kid from the soccer game because you can't make it. What? Like, whoa, like, Dr. Natalie, that's some crazy talk right there. Well, if you're all challenging yourself to do it, I'm telling you, women working together on this come up with fantastical ideas and are such champions for one another on how to get this in check. Because what will happen is, and I'll talk about this a little bit the body-based changes that start to happen when self-care is an actual regimen and is something that you do not get off of, like you just always do it, the actual chemical changes in your body feel super, super good. So you want to keep doing it. Like it's once you get into the routine, if you fall out of it because, you know, some big life event happens and it's a little bit difficult to stay up on it, which is fine, you'll notice physically almost instantaneously. And you've been working on mindfulness now, you know, the first 3 master classes, I have been making you do meditations and mindfulness all through those parts of the curriculum if you're joining group coaching and or doing the online course. So you're getting pretty good at tuning into this body mind. Like it's a connected, living, breathing thing, right? All right. So that is what self-care is really, really about. I talk about creating some tools like a to-do list that's not a to-do list, but a to-fun list, that you're making sure that you're crossing things off on that things on the other to-do list fall off sooner rather than later. I also give you just a ton of ideas for ways to do self-care. Like I said, the content of what you do for your self-care can look very different. However, you do want to make sure that you are doing self-care that in your mind is putting you first. If it's an afterthought, like once I get the kids in bed, I will exercise, that's not self-care. In fact, it's another to-do list item. And so it's gonna actually take away and not replenish you. If you say, hey, I can't do bed on Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays because I have a class that I go to at the gym, that's self-care because you are prioritizing you in order to prioritize, the people in your life and the things in your life and all of what you want to pour yourself into. If you pour into you, there's just more to go around. And that's that abundance idea, right? And it's pulling that locus of control back internally. Like you are a decision maker on where you place your time. You are valued. You have value. And if you don't show up to do the things like get to the soccer game or the thing that on the list for your boss, people notice that, right? We so much of the time get so identified with their needs that that's an external locus of control. We feel like we don't have a say in what's on the list. You absolutely have a say. You just haven't been taught to take that back in. And this whole 4 weeks of the program is just really to help you sink into how you're going to start to do that and make a total shift, a radical shift in how you look at self-care in your life. All right. So those are some tools that I'll give you in the courses. But one of the first lessons that we talk about are boundaries. So boundaries are actually one of the most valuable tools in preserving your energy and your body-mind energy. Boundaries keep what's good in and what is, something that will drain you out, right? And I know that people have an idea of boundaries, but I'm pretty broad about what I mean when I talk about boundaries. Essentially, if you're the vessel that does all the stuff, there's self-care stuff that fills you up. And then there is, things that drain us. So self-care can either be the items that are filling you or the boundaries that you're placing so that things aren't leaking out. That you're not expending energy in places that you don't want to be. If you don't want to do that bake sale, when the PTA asks you, you say, no, I can't. Please ask me again in the future because I might be able to. Right now, I can't. That's a boundary, which is actually a form of self-care. It's a way of keeping what you have preserved within you. And this is kind of a little bit of a math game sometimes, right? Like we're kind of balancing. If we don't have a lot of time to do the ones that fill us up, then we have to do more of the ones that shore us up. Because if you don't keep preserved what is already in, then you're really depleting yourself. And it usually doesn't occur to you until you're super irritable, super tired, maybe getting sick, that this is something that is important, is to actually hold some boundaries in. And if you're overly taxed at a time in your life, let's say, some big thing is happening in your life at that time, then you really probably need to do a little extra of the refill and probably need to put up more of those boundaries. This is what I mean by it's a little bit of a math game, because you don't want to always be at your edge. That's a bad idea. This summer we did a free summer workshop on overwhelm. And that was one of the areas that we got into, was this idea that overwhelm really is happening not because it was the straw that broke the camel's back. It's never the last thing that happened that creates overwhelm. It's the zillion of the little things that happened before that, and maybe a couple big things that happened before that, that completely taxed your system. So you want to keep a good window of tolerance, or emotional bandwidth is what I call it. You want to keep a good buffer, because you never know what's going to happen. Life just throws stuff at us. Oh, like a pandemic, like social distancing. Who the hell had ever planned that was going to happen, and it was going to interfere with so many facets of our life, right? And of our families' lives. It was crazy town. We were trying to figure it out. We were making stuff up as we went along. So boundaries are super important in preserving your energy levels, and in allowing you to, when you fill up, to keep that stuff in, right? So we talk about it pretty early on in this particular self-care month, because I know that if we're teaching each other, here, do this thing, and here, do this thing, and here, do this thing, and try this for your self-care, and you're changing things up a little bit, but you're not noticing where energy is leaking, and you're not noticing where you're getting replenished, though there's some subtleties to that. If you're not noticing that, you can get frustrated real fast that self-care isn't working. And this is another thing that I have many people that come into my office and talk to me about. Not just women in middle age, just many, many people. If you ask the average Joe or Jane what self-care is, oftentimes they think it's eating well, exercise, sometimes sleep, and indulgences. So I spent some money on myself, or I got some chocolate, or whatever. I let myself have ice cream after a long week. So that's, again, about the content, not about the mindset. So they're already a little off. Doesn't mean that those four things the categories that I just went through, wouldn't fit into self-care if it fits within your mindset of serving yourself first. But I can tell you for sure, especially for women, that diet and exercise are dicey, real dicey. We have so much programming and conditioning wrapped up in body image. We have been trained to hate our bodies and to be self-critical of our bodies, to be watching our bodies at all times to catch the thing that doesn't look good. If you pulled one of the models that you're looking on, some sort of advertisement, and asked them if they liked their body 100%, they would tell you no. They even airbrush these models' bodies. They are in the percentage of the people that meet the criteria for beautiful, and yet they have been trained to find the things that are discrepancies that they don't like about themselves. With all that programming and conditioning wrapped up in this idea of eating and exercise, it is important to get your eating and exercise in check, yes. And it's a dicey place to start. So as we start talking about self-care and taking care of yourself and giving yourself time, I'm much more pushy in the department of make sure that you get a lot of sleep, because sleep, listen, we stuck a bunch of college kids years back, in a basement, a lab basement, made them stay up for 72 hours, and they all hallucinated and were delusional, irritable, angry, aggressive. sound familiar? I mean, maybe you're not having hallucinations, but like you go psychotic without enough sleep. And the thing about sleep is, it's super weird, but like it's an accumulation. So if you lose a little here and lose a little here and lose a little here, the circadian rhythm within our body does want to try to catch up. Like you might have a Saturday where you sleep in then, right? But if you've been doing this chronically for so much time, I mean, you've got months of sleep deprivation under your belt. That's a lot. And it takes a minute to come back from stuff like that. So I push things like sleep and I push meditation. Obviously, I push it through the whole thing, but it's both good for that compassionate self-awareness skills building. And I don't think that we get a moment of quiet, even in our own heads, very often. And we probably suck at meditation when we start it. I know I do. I mean, and I can tell you when I'm having a harder time, even in my life, because I can gauge it by how many seconds it takes me to go off on a thought train when I'm actually trying to meditate on a mantra or a concept, or listen to water, or one of those beautiful meditation musics that you can pull up. I can tell you like how distressed I am by how quickly I'm off on a thought island, and I will go. But I'm going to push those ones in the beginning because they're filler uppers, and I know them to be filler uppers. Exercise can sometimes be a sure upper, and it sometimes can be a filler upper, but it depends on how you use it. And eating, if you're in your head about it and weird about your body image, is going to be a drain before it's a help. Now, that being said, nutrition and mental health are intricately connected. And so the next section that I talk about is our bodies. I'm not sure if you know this, but 80% of the serotonin that your body uses is created in your gut. So if your gut health is off, imbalanced in any way, that is going to impact your mental health. That's why we have brain fog, people. That's why we feel moody, people. Like, there is lots of connections of the neurotransmitters and this range of our body. And in fact, that whole polyvagal nervous system that we've been talking about the last few days goes all the way down into your gut. That's why your gut is your second brain, and it tells you things long before your head tells you things like, run away from the lion, she's coming fast. It will tell you here, you feel it like here and here. You don't feel it necessarily here, and you don't even really know what you're doing until seconds after you've started running. So all that to say, yes, I do think that getting into good nutrition will be useful to you, and it wouldn't be where I'd choose to have you focus, especially if you're someone who struggles with creating this mind shift for self-care. The other thing about the body is that it is an untapped resource. So we also talked about this during the summer workshops this year. There are neurotransmitters. So those are like these chemicals in our body that are actually the feel-good chemicals, right? We also have adrenaline and cortisol that do some things that don't feel good, but we have endorphins, serotonin, epinephrine or norepinephrine, oxytocin. All of these chemicals have ways in which we can get them revving in our bodies. Now, is it like taking a medication and having an immediate action? Not always. Sometimes, not always. So I just preface it with that, but we don't use this resource enough. And I think that also goes back to this programming and conditioning, that we hate our bodies so much, we mind divorce ourselves from our bodies. We're not really aware of what's happening in our bodies until it gets to the point of pain, like that's a cramp, or, my gut really feels off. We don't feel the subtleties of that. And so what's unfortunate is it's both a really good assessment tool of where you're at in your self-care. So having mindfulness of your body is super important. And it's a place where you can ground and get feel-good chemicals. They're all here for you all the time. So we'll talk about ways in which you can access those chemicals. Oxytocin is a chemical that our body makes when we are in connection with other people. We're wired to be with other people. Remember, that's one of the 2 reasons our fight, flight, freeze goes off. If we're physically going to be harmed or if we're interpersonally having a threat, then that fight, flight, freeze goes off. So oxytocin is that feel-good chemical. Women that deliver babies or have a baby, they get a rush of oxytocin in those first week or so as they bond with that infant child. It feels so good. They're so cute. And it's like over the top wonderfulness that you're feeling. That's oxytocin. But oxytocin is also when you're falling in love and it's a huge rush and you just can't stop thinking about that person. Oxytocin. Oxytocin is when you see your girlfriends and you get to laugh and you get to just hang out and it's like, oh my gosh, why haven't I been doing this? I've been so, COVID, we were gone and we weren't seeing each other and I forgot how much this feels awesome. Oxytocin actually, when you can access it, feels good pretty much right away. When you go hang out with your friends, pretty much right away. If you're lacking oxytocin in your relationships, in your household, that's something to, ponder. Because I think when we get kind of used to being roommates and not connectors, not connecting, so we don't feel like we belong and we don't feel like we connect, then it can feel to us like we don't have those it's real low levels, like we're just not noticing it. It's funner to go out with your friends. Funner, that's totally not a word. To go out with your friends than it is to stay home with your spouse. That's something to stay curious about. There might be something there that you're participating in a cycle that has disconnection happening in that marriage or partnership instead of connection. And there does need to be the connection. So oxytocin is a great feel-good chemical. Endorphins are one that people kind of have some familiarity with. Yes, you can build endorphins just by, doing exercise or walking. And what I mean by exercise is if you're sedentary all day, just sitting like I do across the couch from people or across the computer, mostly right now from people, then it's just taking it up one notch, just walking. That's it. Just getting your body up and moving it in space because you're sitting all day. So it doesn't have to be something huge. It's not a huge jolt, like if you're a runner and you get a runner's high, but it's something. It does lift the spirit. And this is why when people are depressed and they're getting just really slow and don't want to do much because it takes away our motivation when we feel depressed, if you can get people up in motion, they start to feel better because immediately there's more endorphins in the body and a little bit of norepinephrine. So these are we will talk about ways to kind of tap into your own system and use your own feel-good chemicals so that this becomes an asset again, instead of just this thing that's attached to our head and we're more aware of what's going on in our mind than we are in what is happening in our body. Body-based self-care is it's huge. It's pivotal to this. And it also then becomes the assessment tool that tells you about your boundaries. And so am I shoring it up enough? Maybe not. Maybe my emotional bandwidth is not there. And I need to be thinking about ways to expand that emotional bandwidth. The matter that we have now studied and know to be in stars is in us. We're made of stardust. What? We are linked energetically to just about anything and everything around us. At a quantum physics level, and I don't want to get too mind-bendy right now, but it is mind-bendy. At a quantum physics level, we are made of the same stuff that everything around us is made out of. And even within that most of what makes us up is space, that things are moving or in motion, like the quarks that are, I don't know how many hundreds of them make up an atom, which, we used to think was the smallest thing, but it isn't the smallest building block, that there's actually these things that are smaller. They're just moving in space really, really fast all the time. And they create solidity, it feels like you're solid and the air is not solid. And that just has to do with a difference in how much space is there versus how much, of these little quarks and how they're moving. And the really, really, really wiggy thing about this is that they can be in more than one place at one time. The very same one can be in more than one place at one time. What? They can go out of existence and come into existence, and we're not really sure where they go in the interim. Quantum physicists are like, yep, you see one, you don't see one. What? Like, there are some really weird qualities to the basic building blocks of our body, and it is reasonable. It is literally reasonable to assume that when you're out in the world, that you are picking up on energy and your energy is picking up on other people. Now, I know that you know this to be true. Women are actually pretty perceptive at energy changes. And I think this goes back to kind of being the human helper, that human helper syndrome kind of stuff that we've been raised to do, has also made us pretty keen on some very subtle cues in others that tell us about energy differences or tell us about their mood differences, right? I am sure at least once in your life, probably many times, you've walked into a room and it's been tense and you knew it was tense before anybody said a thing to you, right? That is the concept that we're talking about when we talk about energy. So energetic healing is also borrowing from your environment. So a walk indoors on a treadmill does not give you as much as a walk outside. Walking outside in nature, your resonance is going to try to equalize with the resonance of nature. And nature tends to have a resonance that's in that calm alpha wave, maybe, theta wave even stage. So your body is trying to match that, because anytime you put two things that have different energies together, what they try to do is equalize. Right? So the energies and how much it's moving inside you will try to match where you are. And it's why when you're with somebody who's super calming, you feel calmer. And it's why when you're with somebody who's super frenetic with their energy, you start to feel that way, right? So there's some ways to cheat in this too, because you can use nature to help you to take care of your resonance. So if you're having a day that's particularly difficult and you are feeling some of that agitation, taking a walk outside will give you more bang for your buck than taking a walk on the treadmill in your house. Bringing it back in, taking care of yourself, making sure that you're first, so that in putting you first, you're putting everything that you want to pour yourself into first. You are abundantly expanding what you have for energy, for emotional bandwidth, and that will impact every single person that you come in contact with. Similarly, if you don't do it, it's going to impact every single person you come in contact with. So whether you do self-care or you choose not to do self-care in this manner, you're still making a choice about how you're showing up in the world. And I guarantee you, especially for those women that come in and talk to me about, I don't know, I don't even know what I want, a lot of it is they've divorced their head from their body. And so self-care is a really great place to start. And getting into that body-based self-care is a really great place to start. That is it, my friends, for self-care. It is a radical notion to put yourself first, and it's a tough one to do on your own. I do think, though, you're going to struggle with this as a woman in midlife. Having a community of women around you, as we all are trying to work this out together, is only going to help you with this. It's only going to lift you up a little bit more.